Hey everyone, Shin here, just coming at you with the update to the HAMtastic build that I've been working on. Been doing a lot of testing. Finally came up with a variant of the build that I really like. It's different enough from the previous version that it warrants a video, so that's what this is, obviously. Before I tell you what has changed, what hasn't is pretty much everything except for the traits. The build still uses Balance Stance, Endure Pain, and Bulge Charge as the utilities. It still uses Healing Signet as the heal. It still uses full Berserker stat gear, Melandra runes, Sigils of Air and Hydromancy in the Greatsword, and Sigils of Paralyzation and Impact in the Hammer. I did try testing Rampage as a new elite, and while Rampage is better since the patch, it's not quite compatible with the HAMtastic build, so sticking with Signated Rage as the elite. Now, what has changed? The traits before, if you remember right, were 4, 0, 5, 2, 3. Getting Confusion on Interrupt, getting Dark March, Cleansing Ire, Leg Specialist, all that fun stuff. But with some of the changes that came through, I noticed the old version wasn't really performing as well as it should anymore. So, I did a bunch of testing, and what I came up with is now 2, 2, 4, 2, 4. Really strange spread out build is probably what you're thinking, but again, I did a bunch of testing. It works. I'll explain why I made the changes I did. The first change you probably notice is it now has 2 points into arms and 2 points out of strength. The reason for that, first off, the Confusion on Interrupt, while it was a good mind game trick, it was fun to mess with people's heads with the confusion, I found that it wasn't quite making as much of an impact as I would have liked. Since the patch, people seem to have gotten used to it. It wasn't really causing people to react the way I wanted them to anymore. I know I was shrugging it off whenever I saw someone running my own build against me. So I was willing to get rid of that. Unfortunately, that also meant we got rid of Building Momentum, the minor trait, which means burst skills restore endurance for more dodges. Yeah, that kind of sucked to get rid of, but with the change, it was necessary. There was also the passive 100 power that came with that, but that's made up for elsewhere. The points got moved down into arms, which gives a chance for bleeding on crits. It's a decent cover condi. It's not really the main reason we're going to arms, but it's handy. There's also the passive crit bonus, crit chance bonus, and condition damage bonus. The condition damage doesn't really matter. The main reason I went down into arms is to get the Furious Speed trait. Furious Speed, for those who don't know, gives swiftness on crits. Guaranteed. And with the trait spread this build has, the amount of swiftness you get from this trait is 1 second longer than its cooldown. So you effectively have infinite swiftness in combat as long as you are hitting people and you are not having that boon ripped. This is important to cover a weakness that has shown up since the patch. What happened in the patch was they nerfed the boon duration on Signated Rage by 5 seconds. That includes the swiftness on there. And while I was testing the other variants of the build, I noticed I wasn't able to catch up to my targets as easily as I could before. Lo and behold, it was because of that reduced swiftness duration. So, I figured, okay, these other variants aren't working. Let's try something crazy, and let's go for swiftness. I figured it was the mobility, and after switching this trait, that fixed a lot of the problems I was having. I was able to catch targets more, I was able to keep them CC'd by being in range of them, and I was able to kill people more reliably than the other variants of the build. For reference, the other variants of the build were 20426. Those were both running either Brawler's Recovery or Burst Mastery. While both of those variants worked, I found I was having that trouble catching up to them because of a lack of mobility in combat. Surprise, surprise for Warrior. But after switching to Furious Speed, I noticed I was able to catch people again. I was able to keep them in melee and keep them CC'd until I killed them. Even with Leg Specialist, I was still having trouble. Now for the mobility issue, some of you may be wondering why not just use Warrior Sprint down in Discipline. The reason for that is dodging is still very important for the build, and losing that vigor on stance is a big deal. I cannot do that. If you cannot dodge enough, you will die. This build is still fairly glassy as far as when you are actually taking hits, so it's all the more important to continue being able to dodge as much as you can with vigorous focus. I couldn't get rid of Destruction the Empowered for it because that's where the damage is being made up for from losing the 100 in Strength and Armored Attack, so I couldn't do that. And the build doesn't go deep enough into Discipline to get that third trait. Even if I did, I'm not going to replace Burst Mastery or Brawler's Recovery for it. So it was a no-go to go with Warrior Sprint. Now, regarding things like Brawler's Recovery and Burst Mastery for the variants that I was running. Brawler's Recovery, while it's neat, it's powerful, it's worth running for certain builds now, it's not quite useful enough for the HAMtastic build because it doesn't make that much of a difference against the builds that are going to be spamming conditions. With a build like HAMtastic, you have one major Condy removal with Cleansing Ire. Throwing in Brawler's Recovery that only removes one condition per swap doesn't really size up to Cleansing Ire. Is it a bad trait anymore? No. It's worth running for certain builds now, but not for HAMtastic. With the variant that used Brawler's Recovery, I did think about using the new Sigil of Cleansing that was introduced in the patch as well. That is essentially Brawler's Recovery in Sigil form. It removes one condition when you swap to the weapon with it. That would bring the build up to 2 conditions removed every time I swap to that weapon. The thing is, the current sigils for the build are, as far as I'm concerned, the best for it, because the hammer has Sigil of Impact, which is 10% more damage on CC targets. It's essentially free 10% damage. The other sigil on the hammer is Sigil of Paralyzation, which keeps them CC for longer with Earthshakers. That synergizes too well with Sigil of Impact. I don't want to give that up. On the Greatsword, it has Sigil of Hydromancy, which I don't want to give up, because that is either a blind clear, or that is a large burst of damage and a chill when I swap with Greatsword. And Sigil of Air is a nice burst of damage that can either down someone or push them into the red zone and allow me to pressure them even further and then down them that way. Those 4 sigils complement the build's playstyle so well that I don't want to give any of them up for Sigil of Cleansing just to make Brawler's Recovery even better. The other variant, which used Burst Mastery, while yes, Burst Mastery was a nice boost to damage, it was a very, very good thing to have when I was actually hitting people with Earthshakers and Arcing Slices. It still caused that swiftness issue, that mobility issue that I was talking about earlier, so eventually I dropped that and went for the current iteration. The other thing you may notice that changed is Armored Attack, the number 5 trait in defense, its point got moved down into Discipline for Destruction the Empowered again. I did some testing on the numbers, and it actually turns out that Destruction the Empowered, in most situations in World v. World, does more damage than Armored Attack. Simply because most targets actually do have at least 2, if not more, boons on them all the time. That's at least 6% or more damage that isn't quite made up for by Armored Attack. Even with Protection, you're still running into the same problem with both traits, so it's better to go with the one that mitigates it the most, which is Destruction the Empowered. Those are the changes to the HAMtastic build. It's a bit more of a balanced trait spread than I would have expected to run across, but it brought the build back to where I want it to be. I'm not going to do any gameplay examples in this one, mainly because it takes longer to produce the video than I would like, and I wanted to get this info out to you guys ASAP. So there's not going to be any gameplay examples in this one. However, there is a combo that I do want to let you guys know that is very powerful for this build, and actually very important for this build. When you are fighting someone, use your adrenaline on Earthshaker still. You still want to prioritize using full adrenaline bars on Earthshaker. However, what you can do now is you can hit someone with a full bar Earthshaker, get a few more hits on them, swap to the Greatsword, and if they are under half health, as soon as you get 1 bar of adrenaline, which is not hard to do with this build, you can do an Arcing Slice for a bunch of damage. The thing about Arcing Slice, its new iteration, is the damage is not based on how much adrenaline you have. It's very similar to how it was before the patch. The damage is based on how much health your target has. What's dependent on the adrenaline is how much fury you get after using it, just like its previous iteration. The thing is, this build doesn't really care about the fury because you have it from Signature Rage, and it hits hard enough as it is, and has high enough crit that that extra fury isn't massive. It's still beneficial, but it's not a massive deal. So, the goal is to hit them with Hammer CC, get them under half health, and then once they're under half health and reliably there, then you can start using this combo of blowing entire Earthshakers, getting a little bit more adrenaline, and as soon as you have that first bar of adrenaline, hitting them for 4, 5k, 6k arcing slices to the face. It has worked wonders for 1vx fights. Just wanted to let you guys know that combo. It's really powerful and a lot of fun. Also, one more thing, adrenaline, the change has made not wasting it all the more important for this build. You need to be all the better about landing your burst skills with HAMtastic now, because if you don't, you're going to lose all the adrenaline, and you're going to not gain anything beneficial back. You will not gain cleansing ire. You will not gain your adrenal health. You're not going to gain anything if you miss your burst skills. So, you need to make sure you are landing as many burst skills as you can. Inevitably, you will miss a few. It's just how it goes. You'll get blinded, or someone will snare you, or whatever. But you need to make sure you're landing as many as possible, because if you miss, you lose it all, and it's a big detriment. So, keep that in mind. If you're not skilled with landing your bursts, practice that. Make sure it's working, because the HAMtastic needs that adrenaline to be used properly. If not, you're going to be hurting. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Thanks all for tuning in. I will be working on all the other YouTube projects that I posted in my previous video. If you are new to the channel, feel free to subscribe. I post videos here pretty often, both highlights from the stream and various other video productions like this. It's much appreciated. Feel free to leave a comment, feedback, question, whatever, on this video below. This is what I'm going to be running. This is the current iteration of the HAMtastic build. And other than that, feel free to check out the stream as per usual. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video or around the stream. Take care, everyone.